Good morning, everyone. We're winding towards the end of our college information series and the end of my presentations of the college information series. As many of you know, I'm retiring. So it'll be a different face and a different voice next year. And maybe for the first time in 4 years, different looking slides, because I think these slides are getting a little old, but that's okay. So we are looking at building a balanced list. This is, I think, one of the most important presentations, although we don't get big crowds for this. And so I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here at home, and let's get started with some Q&As. Okay, this is going to take some participation. I want you to drop your answers in the chat. How many four-year colleges do you think are in the United States? Let's just get a number. Throw it in the chat. We'll see what you come up with. How many four-year colleges? We have a vote for 4,000. We have a vote for 150,000. What else we got? We got a vote for 5,000. Anyone else? Because I know we got a few more people in here who might have opinions. Okay, 3,000. So I'm going to give you the answer, and it is specifically for four-year colleges that are either public or private and does not include public, private, but does not include the for-profit industry. Those are your colleges like University of Phoenix, and there's some trade schools and other colleges that are for-profit. But in terms of the typical colleges that a high school student applies to, it's approximately 2,400, usually a little bit above that. Every now and then we have a closure, every now and then we have an opening, but it's about 2,400, and that is a lot of college, even though we had some votes for 150,000 in the chat box. That's okay. That's okay. Let's keep going. Now, what is the average acceptance rate? What is the average acceptance rate? Anywhere between 0 to 100%. What is the average acceptance rate? Okay, we've got a 20%. We've got someone who said, as you told me last week, so I'm not going to say that one out loud to our listeners. 30%. So we've got a 30%, a 20%, and yes, we've got so I was slightly off. It was a 73%. That was a 72. I probably told you wrong. 72, 73. It's high. The average acceptance rate is not crazy as the television, the media, the news would have you think. Most students get into most colleges. And I'm going to say this over and over and over again. Most students get into most colleges. And so I hope that takes some of the fear away from kind of this idea that college is impossible. And this is true in California too, especially as you start looking at our UCs and CSUs. Maybe we have a couple that are problematic, but for the most part, there's a place for everyone here. And let's actually look at the admission rates. Now, when I did the analysis, I go to it's called iPEDS, the Integrated Post-Secondary Data System, which is what colleges use to report to the government. It looks like 1,624 reported their admission numbers, and I did an analysis of that. And you can see the percentage rates, and less than 10%. Colleges that have a lower than 10% admission rate, it's about 2% of all colleges, and it's approximately 27. It adjusts from year to year. I think I updated these numbers at the end of last year. So 27 colleges are at that crazy rate. You can probably guess what they are. They're your Stanfords and your Harvards and your places like that. About 3% of colleges are between 10 and 20%. That's about 42 colleges. I think Berkeley falls in there. So yeah, we've got a couple of our UCs in there. But we've just talked about 5% of colleges. 37 colleges, excuse me, another 37% are between 21 and 30%. So now when we look at it, we have 7% of colleges are below a 30% admission rate. You can kind of see why it actually shouldn't be fearful when you apply to college. And then when we get to that 31 to 40%, we're only looking at 49 colleges. That's another 3%. When we're looking at that 41 to 50% range, we're looking at 67 colleges or 4%. And that leaves us about 85% of colleges, of those that reported admission numbers, which is most of the ones that you've heard of, over 50%. 85% admit their students. There should be no fear of getting into college. But people seem to want the same colleges, and that tends to be part of the problem. If everybody thinks that the only good college in California is UCLA or Berkeley, we have a problem. But there are plenty of colleges all through the United States and California, public and private, that will happily open their doors, their arms, and their wallets for you. Let's keep going. Okay. This is a statement that you're going to hear me say over and over and over again. Most colleges take most students. Most colleges take most students. And that is the theme of our presentation. But how do you know? How do you know how many colleges to apply for? I get that question all the time. Just a general, I don't know anything about you, but there's a random person saying, how many colleges should I apply to? And the answer is, I don't know. It's really going to depend on the specific colleges that you want to apply to. I have two kids. One applied to 4 single-digit colleges, so his list was much bigger. He didn't get into any of those 4 single-digit colleges his first time around. Graduate school he did, but not as an undergraduate. So he had a balanced list, and he had plenty of choices. He had about 7 colleges he did get into. My younger son applied to one that had a 99% acceptance rate. He was one and done. He didn't need to apply to anymore. He knew where he wanted to go. We knew he would get in. He did within 2 weeks, and that was that. So when we look at a list of colleges, we put them into categories. And most of you have probably heard of these categories. We have the likely. Some people use the term safety. I hate that term because it makes it sound like you're only doing it because there's no other option. And that's not the case. My younger son applied to what we would call a highly likely college. And it was also his choice to go to that highly likely college. It doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean it's less than. It simply means you're highly likely to be admitted because of your GPA and test scores being in a certain location. So it isn't necessarily only the GPA or only the percentage that counts. It is also how you are doing in comparison to other students at that school. So if your GPA and test scores are above the 75th percentile, it's a likely for you. And if it is a school that accepts a high number of students, like the one that my son went to, it's also a likely for you. However, there's a catch, and that is it's not a true likely unless it's also affordable. So we have a variety of different affordability options as well. And so I don't like to put it on someone's list unless the student can afford it as well. So likely I want to put that in as a caveat that it's not really likely if you're going to get in and it's going to cost $90,000 and your family can't do that. So likelies have to include financial aspects. A target would be a college that the learner is likely to be admitted to based on their GPA and test scores being 50% or above of the students. Academically, it's a match for them as well, but it doesn't mean that it's likely. It means that it makes sense for them to apply. Like when a student says, I want to apply to this college, I say that makes sense for you, but we still need to include some colleges that you really like that are likely. And the target is one that makes sense, but sometimes it's just about the numbers. So I also notice in red, you're also likely to receive some kind of financial assistance that makes it affordable, whether that be need-based aid, merit-based aid, cash flow. That target also needs to be affordable to call it a target. You could have a school that you're well within the academic and GPA range, but it may not give you any financial aid. I don't consider that a target. I put that in the reach category because now we're looking at both an admission and a financial possibility. So it's not cut in stone. There are no definite baskets here, but this is language that I like to use so that everyone kind of is on the same page. Excuse me, frog in my throat today. Okay, the reach school. You're within acceptable range, but the school has a lower acceptance rate. That's one possibility. It might be that you are really qualified for that school, but there's just too many people applying, or your statistics are currently lower than typically admitted students, like the 25th percentile, but you still want to give it a shot. It's a reach, give it a try. I've actually had some students do pretty well at like UCLA and Berkeley because of their non-academics. Their academics were fine, but competitive wise, they weren't quite in the same category as some of the other students applying, but they had a lot to bring to the table. So sometimes we get that. I want to indicate and state again, their academics were fine. Their academics were not low, but they weren't necessarily at the same level of competition. So I've had students that say, I have to deal with this every year where the student says, I've done something spectacular. And I say, you've taken no honors classes and you have three C's. And they say, but I've done something spectacular. And I say, well, we need to get some other colleges on your list. So there is kind of it's holistic in many of these cases. So, and then we have what the lottery schools are. And I don't know if lottery is the best word because people still play the lottery. But you have a very low chance of it being admitted simply because maybe they take 20,000 people and 80,000 apply. Maybe you are nowhere within reach academically. And even if you are a perfect academic match, you have done all the things, you have even possibly cured cancer for all I know. It's still tough to get in. Very tough, especially when you're talking Ivy League schools, MIT, Caltech, Stanford, all of those schools. Doesn't mean we don't have students admitted. I worked with a student, not an iLEAD student, but another student, a traditional homeschool student this year who was headed to Stanford. And it happens, but it's really rare. And that student was really rare. And so I call it a lottery because I want to make it really clear that no matter how good you are, it's probably not happening, but it is a possibility if you want to give it a try. I never discourage, but I do want to make sure that there's enough colleges on that list. Anything with a single digit admission rate, I call a lottery school, and that includes UCLA. Because UCLA, last I looked, was at 9%. I don't know what it was for this last year, but the year before it was 9%. So I consider every one of those a lottery school. Okay. Now, what helps the admission office choose what's going on the other side of the desk? Because you can see the admission rates and you can see your GPA and your grades and things like that, but there's significantly more to it, and a lot of this is out of your control. We have institutional factors, the things that matter to the college. You might be perfect, and someone identical to you may have been admitted last year, and someone identical to you may be admitted next year. But what's going on the year you apply that matters to the college that could affect your ability to get in? So typically it's not you, it's them. And you notice I have that exception on the bottom of the screen. Well, it could be you. If you apply to Harvard with a 2.5, it is you. But, in a lot of cases, you are a perfect match. And you still may not get in. And that's not you. You didn't do anything wrong. So these are common institutional factors that could influence college admission. I'm going to go over each one of them specifically, but we're looking at enrollment management. That is the person behind there who has to make the decisions: diversity, geography, legacy, mission, athletics, majors, special population, special talent. Let's dive in. Enrollment management. There's a person at every college called the Chief Enrollment Management Officer, or a similar name like that. And their job is to make sure they don't have too many, too few, just enough. The money, it's going to be affordable. They're going to be able to pay their bills. They're in charge of all that. So these are the things that could influence their decision making. So for example, it could be that this year there's a sudden spike in application numbers. That happens. There's also a sudden drop in application numbers. That can happen too. It could be over enrollment from the year before. They offered enough spots and they thought that a certain percentage would say yes to their yes. This happened at Reed when my son went. My older son, he applied to Reed. He actually went to Reed. And the year before he applied, they admitted their usual number of people, but more of the people they admitted wanted to come than they expected. And suddenly they didn't have enough dorm rooms and their classes were kind of large. And that affected the following year, my son's year, where they accepted far fewer people. They accepted him, so we were happy. There's also such like a balance between those who can and cannot pay. So a college like Occidental, this is a really good example because they say this right in their info session. They use tuition to balance. And so when you have a very strong student who cannot pay a very high amount, a student with higher need, they will accept the very strong student, but they're making sure there's also a student who has the ability to pay, who's going to weigh that. So we have colleges that use tuition to balance their need-based and their non-need-based students. We also have colleges that don't need to worry about that at all. They have plenty of their endowment. They are loaded, so to speak, and they can admit anyone they want, but there are some colleges that have to do a balance. That is unfair. And that's how business works. Um, and those that depend on tuition versus endowment, same discussion. So, for example, a college that doesn't have a lot of sort of money that's coming in, donations, that's not the way that the college runs. They are dependent on tuition. They're going to, be offering to students who can pay. Some colleges actually are aware of your financial aid when you apply, and some colleges have a policy where they don't look, they just accept. If they're dependent on tuition, they're going to be aware. And if they're dependent on their endowment or the money that they just have, they don't have to look and they can admit anyone because they know it's affordable. So these things are going on in the background and you have no control over them. There's also special populations, and a major one are athletes. And so a student who is an athlete may have they may be losing their star soccer player, or they may be, in need of certain people on certain teams. And so sometimes they will give a boost to to the soccer player that year, and they gave a boost to the squash player the year before. We never know what they need from year to year. Legacy. This is a tough one, and some schools are actually clamping down. A legacy is a student whose parent, typically you only need one, attended and graduated as an undergraduate from that school. Once in a while, you'll get a grad student, and that becomes a legacy. But if you have student, little Johnny, I always say little Johnny, there's no little Johnnies in here. Little Johnny wants to go to Princeton. And little Johnny's mom went to Princeton. Little Johnny's grandpa went to Princeton. There's a much higher chance that little Johnny's going to Princeton too, even though little Susie is doing a little better than him academically and could really make it to Princeton as well. Legacies have a higher acceptance rate at schools that accept legacies. There's a lot of clamping down. What's really interesting is a law was passed in California saying that if a college decided to use legacy in their admission policies, they would cut some of the funding. And so Stanford and USC decided that they didn't care. They were going to continue on with legacy and not take that government funding because legacy was more important to them. Just something interesting. Other colleges decided not to. Make sure I don't have anyone in the waiting room. There we go, letting them in. Okay, children of donors. If you have enough money to donate a library, your kid is probably getting in. If your parent donated that building over there to the left, you're probably getting in as well. And we're not talking someone who does their annual $50 donation. We're talking about somebody who's donated a building. And children of staff. Sometimes children of staff get a bump. We've actually had that a couple years in a row. One year we had, it was the same school, in fact, we had a child of someone get in. The student was very qualified. I just want to put that. The next year, same school, we had a student of a staff member not get in. Qualification wasn't at the same level. So they didn't check a student they didn't take a student just because of the staff member. The student also was qualified, but that definitely gave them a bump. So these are our special populations. We also have diversity of class. And the word diversity sometimes sets off kind of interesting discussions because a lot of times everyone assumes that means race. And at one time, race was something that could give a small bump, small. Supreme Court kind of made that one go away, but it doesn't change the true meaning of diversity in terms of college, which includes geography. North Dakota. If you really, really want to go to Harvard, move to North Dakota. I don't know why you'd want to live in North Dakota, but it could help you get into some of these colleges because they never have enough people from North Dakota. It might be that you have specific interests that they really need at the school. There, you might have something really interesting that they say, wow, we have so many people interested in the same thing. It'd be nice to have somebody interested in something else. Maybe your background and experiences You notice that we have military over there. We have people from farms over there. We have a map of North Dakota over there. We want a gender balance. I don't know what's going on with the ability to balance gender. I know that that is being discussed in our government, but when you have a place like MIT where a huge portion of the applicants are male, or you have some liberal arts college where a much larger portion of the application pool is female, they'll try to balance that. Um, Underrepresented groups, and once again, you can see veterans often are really highly welcome. Um, Returning students, I think Brown University and Ivy League University, I think that's the one that actually has a program for returning women specifically, and military. And so they want their class to be diverse. They want different people because different people make for better learning. You go into a classroom, you're discussing literature and you're discussing it with someone who has been in the military, someone who has lived abroad, someone who is international, someone who has been raised on a farm. And the viewpoints that are going to come out of those discussions are significantly better. So diversity of all kinds of things really, really matters. Major is a huge factor in some colleges, specifically when you're looking at specific majors such as computer science, engineering, business, nursing, and I have put psychology on here. To be really, really clear, there are some colleges that don't look at it at all. Typically, your liberal arts colleges, the ones that kind of bring everyone in, they really want a wide variety. You may not have the same dilemma, but when you're starting to deal with colleges that do ask for major, this would include our UCs and CSUs, by the way. For the most part, major's not going to have an effect, but there are these rare majors like computer science and engineering where they have limited spots and it is saturated. Computer science is saturated. And so if your goal is UCLA and you don't care, computer science sounds nice, but I don't know, so does sociology. Um, I will warn you though, you go in and under sociology, but you really wanted computer science, you're probably not going to be able to change majors to computer science. So if you really want to do computer science, you got to go in as computer science. If it's just something interesting, don't randomly put it down because it's going to be harder to get in. Some majors are impacted and they're much harder to get into, and other majors are not impacted. Also, some they just need students like horticulture or classics or something like that if it's real. Also, I want to point out that when you apply to a school and you say, I am interested in horticulture, because maybe that'll get me in, they're going to want to see horticulture classes and things that you've done that are interesting. They want to see for classics, maybe that you've been studying Greek and Latin. Maybe you've gone on you had an interest in mythology and things like that. So you can't fake it. But just understand if you're applying in some of these majors like computer science, it's going to be harder to get in. Just want to make that really, really clear. Okay. Talent, extraordinary talent specifically. Watched was a equestrian that's horse doing horse stuff and was on the Olympic team. Needless to say, early acceptance to Stanford. And so if you have an extraordinary talent or extraordinary accomplishments, that does bump you up. That is considered a hook, and it can give you a boost because what college wouldn't want you there? What college doesn't want an Olympian? What college doesn't want somebody who was able to turn banana peels into uh, gasoline? There was a student that was famous for that in another country, but it's really interesting because if you have an extraordinary accomplishment and extraordinary talent, yeah, it does give you a bump. And it's just something to know, especially as you get to those more selective colleges. This is a weird one. Demonstrated interest. Demonstrated interest means that the college has had a record of your interest. Now, when you're going to a college that has, I'd say, 10%, 15%, 20% admission rate, this doesn't matter at all. If you want to go tour Harvard, nobody cares. They're picking who they want. Same thing with some of these other selectives. But there are colleges that do want to admit students that they are thinking are more likely to attend. I think the most common selective one may be Tulane. I think there is There's, oh my gosh, Case Western Reserve is another one. And there are some others. Sarah Lawrence, that's another biggie. So these are colleges where if you're able to demonstrate some interest, you go up higher on the list of students. And interest can come in many ways. Of course, the major way to track interest is to go to the college. And that is just not affordable for most people in the country. And ever since COVID, we've had this magic thing happen called Zoom, where you all are watching. We're in Zoom right now. But what's really nice is ever since COVID, colleges learned how to use it. And now, if you log into a Zoom tour, a Zoom info session, that's considered demonstrated interest. If you open emails that you get from the college and you scroll around on the college website, they can track that. It shows up on their student management system for applications. And so I actually went to I went to a conference, the National Conference for College Admission Counselors, and I attended a session on demonstrated interest. And one of the presenters had a child applying that year, and he was, talking about demonstrated interest at his own school. But he said, "This is what I tell my student." He said, "I tell her to go do some homework, and then go to a website, open an email, because if you open that email, it's already connected to your email address. Open that email and go to a part of the website that's interesting. So if you're interested in biology, go to the biology department, leave it there, and then go do some more homework. And then get back in and go find a club. And then go to the bathroom. And then go back in and travel around a little bit more." And so take advantage of the easy things to do for demonstrated interest. Also, if you go to a college fair, you are usually going to have a badge. Make sure they beep that little badge. If you have an email or a phone call, all of that is going in their system, everything. So if it is a college that tracks demonstrated interest, sometimes it's hard to tell, that can help you because they're trying to protect their yield. And yield are the number of students that say yes to their yes. Remember earlier I said that the college that my son went to was not able to predict their yield, and more people said yes, and they had too many students. This is all about the college. It's not about you. It's about the college and them trying to predict the numbers who will show up. So if you've actually spent some time exploring the college, well, there you go. Okay. So if you would like to research your own admission statistics, we have over 3,000 colleges. I know I said there was 2,400 colleges. SCORE has over 3,000. That's because we also have for-profit colleges. We have community colleges. We got a lot of colleges in SCORE. There's a lot of information on SCORE. You have an account. If you are a learner, if you are a parent, your learner has an account and can give you an account. It's actually in their profile. It says invite a parent. You get your very own account. Please let your student keep their own account separate from yours. And you have an account and you can do all the same research and you can even give them suggestions and things like that. So we have an account here. There's also a fabulous website called the College Navigator. It is government data on an incredible number of college factors. In the college that I used to work for, I used to work at a university. I was actually the person, part of my job was reporting this data to the government, and this is where the data went. And I reported so much data, so many things throughout the year. So if you want to actually see that data that's coming from the college itself, that's where you go. You could just Google College Navigator, it'll show up. It's going to show up right on the top. There's also a website that tracks common data sets. So the common data set, I think I've talked about it in a lot of different places. You can Google the common data set. It's divided. It goes significantly more in depth than your College Navigator, by the way. They're adding more stuff. But it's voluntary, and you just Google, you go college name, CDS, common data set. And it should be right there. And they're updating it as they go, and it's significantly more in depth. And some of that college data is actually on a website called, believe it or not, collegedata.com. But the common data set is actually a really great way to get some information on colleges. This book, and he has a new one, I think it's called Dream College, but Jeff Selingo really writes about all of this in a way to understand it. He has gone into admission offices and actually gone through the process with them for this book. He's talked to students, he's watched the process. And I think if you are someone who really is just interested in understanding the wheels behind admissions, this is the best book you can get. Got a new book out, Dream College. Haven't read that one yet. I've read this one. It is well worth the purchase. Okay, you can always contact us. This is a boring slide. I should have put a picture up here. All of us are here. That's my Calendly. As I mentioned, I think most of you know I'm retiring in June. I'm still here though. You can still make appointments. And don't worry, I'm the interviewer that's interviewing my replacement. I'm going to get you a good one. So have no fear. But you can make an appointment with us anytime. Email me, or that's my link down below. And that's it. So if you are watching from home, I thank you for joining our little YouTube channel here on iLEAD High School. But if not, you are missing our Q&A. So if not, if you are here, hang on. I'm gonna wrap it up, and then we're gonna start our Q&A. I can already see questions in the chat. So bye, friends at home, and I'm gonna stop the recording.